And these are making me laugh. Thank you for the chat lyrics that you know every word to. Um, all right, Emily, let's go to our next slide as our quote for the month from the lovely Bob Ross. And the quote is, "Talent is pursued interest. Anything that you're willing to practice, you can do," which I appreciated that as starting to learn new skills for gardening. I'm trying to increase my gardening skills, and hopefully that will become a talent at some point, but it's something that I'm really interested in practicing. But a talent is a pursued interest. Anything that you're willing to practice, you can do. All right, next slide, Emily, is our update from the board meeting. So this past just a couple weeks ago in our May board meeting, we had some lively discussion that I appreciated actually. A couple of people from our assessment director group provided public feedback, public comment on this rule change, and appreciated listening to those of you who were there to listen to the board's discussion on R277406. So there were a couple of changes specifically for the early numeracy assessments, which are Acadience math for this year. So the change to the board rule starting for the 26-27 school year is that Acadience math will be an optional assessment for those students in K3. What will happen is that the board or USBE will pay for those licenses for those students that are in K3 that are LEAs that are interested in administering the Acadience math assessments. The Acadience reading assessments are still required for K3 and still optional for 4 through 6. So that did not change. The only change was the requirement for Acadience math starting in the 26-27 year. The plan from the board was then to go to the legislature and look at if they want to continue requiring an early numeracy assessment, that gets funded. I think they heard that loud and clear from the people who spoke up at public comment, as well as from those of you who reached out to your board members about unfunded mandates. I think that was something that our board heard. So in a couple of slides, Jared's going to be talking about Acadience math and has a survey for all of you to look at, just so we know if you're interested in administering the Acadience math assessment next year, so we can get some counts as far as who's anticipating continuing to administer that assessment. At this point, we have funding for all K3 students in the state to participate in the manual licenses. Manual entry licenses, that's where you still paper pencil, you would input the data manually into the Acadience Learning Online system. If we have few enough people that are interested in administering the assessment, and we still have budget for everyone to administer at least K1, with the digital licenses, we can do that. The other option that Acadience has provided for us is that they will allow the LEAs to purchase and extend to the digital license. So we pay $3 a student. The license fee that they're giving us for the digital entry is $5.95 per student. So if the LEA is interested in paying that additional $2.95 per student, that's something that you can work out with Acadience. So the question to clarify, if you choose to give the K3 math, Acadience math assessment, the state will pay for manual. At this point, we have funding for manual entry licenses for all K3 students. So yes, if you choose to give Acadience math K3, the state will pay for those licenses in Acadience Learning Online. It is not required, it is optional. So K3 math is not required. K3 reading is still required. Let me make sure I'm still looking through some of the some of the songs. I think that's it. If there's still clarity with the math questions, we'll continue this with the survey. So Jared will bring up that survey in just a minute. We were going back and forth on allowing if it's a choice for you to administer If we say, if you're going to do it at your LEA, you have to do it for all K3. And ultimately, we decided that the board's request was that it be an option. And so it will be similar to what we do for fourth through sixth reading, where that's optional, but the state still pays for the license. And that's optional down to the individual student in fourth through sixth grade. So that's the way we decided to go for the K3 Acadience Math, that it's completely optional for anyone. What we would like to know is anticipation of who you plan to administer to. If you're thinking, yeah, we're just going to do it, but only in kindergarten or first grade, or we're only going to do it for our students that we believe are below benchmark, or however you decide to do that, it can be down to the student level that it's optional. Okay. Um, so Brenda is, or sorry, Brianna, is any K3 math assessment required? No, it's only, it's completely optional. The Acadians Math is who we will have a contract with and who we will pay for at the state level to provide an early numeracy assessment. Does that mean that the K1 assessments delivered on iPad would not be available unless we pay the extra per student? Yes, that's correct. So, Lindsay, at this point, that is correct that we only the ones that you have been delivering on the iPad are not available unless you pay the extra $2.95 per student. If there are few enough people that are planning on administering and it fits within our budget, then we can look at providing those digital licenses, at least for K1 for people across the state. But at this point, what we can guarantee is we have funding for the manual entry. And yeah, thanks, how the local board decisions to determine on administration. And Tamara, so as a school, we do not need to give any math for any grade. As far as Acadience is not required, it is optional. You still would be required to administer like RISE starting in grade 3 for math. But as far as early numeracy assessments, there is not starting in the 26-27 year. So we have to finish out this 25-26 year. It is still required this year. But starting in 26-27, it is not required. It is completely optional for an early numeracy assessment. But as far as at the state level, we will be providing licenses for those that choose to administer Acadience Math. We will be providing those licenses for the manual entry, and then we'll keep you posted on funding and once we see how many people are planning to administer, what we have funding for, if we have additional funding for the digital licenses or not. So, Julie, the main differences between the digital and manual entry really are for the kindergarten and first grade. There's not as it's an option in second and third grade on the computation, but you're still entering a lot manually. So the biggest differences between the digital and manual entry are in kindergarten and first grade. There are some measures where the digital entry, the teacher is able to like hold an iPad and immediately input the student responses as they're going along. The manual entry would be you're scoring those on paper pencil and then coming back into the system later and inputting that information for the students on how they did on each of those, what their responses were to each of the questions. So it's a manual entry at a later time versus the digital entry is immediately entered into the system as the student is being administered the assessment. And Kendra, will districts still be required to report math progress monitoring data? No, that's not a requirement for math to report the progress monitoring. And actually, that hasn't been, there's still the requirement with reading progress monitoring to continue to report, well, that we still monitor reading progress monitoring for those students that are below benchmark, but not a requirement for math. And then let's see, Erin, will you let us know how to apply for the digital entry possible funding? Yeah, so after, I can't remember the exact date that we gave. It's a couple weeks into June for determining if you're planning on administering Acadience Math next year or not. After that, we can calculate how many students approximately that would be and how much funding we have. If you're interested in purchasing those digital entry licenses, it'll be like probably middle of June to end of June. I think we had said we would notify the board by the end of June that of what we plan and how many people are planning on administering Acadience Math next year. So we could let you know by the end of June, and then we can let you know the process for if we don't have enough funding to cover the digital licenses for everyone, the process for you contacting Acadians and working with them to invoice you for the additional amount for the digital entry. And then Julie, the digital licenses for the schools, we would pay $3 for a manual entry license, and then the digital entry licenses are $5.95 for us at the state level. So it would be an additional $2.95 per student. And then Tamara, can we get back at a later date, or do we need to do the survey today? No, the survey, and Jared will have that open. He'll talk about that in just a little bit when we talk about Acadians. But the survey is open until the middle of June, so you have almost a month um, to make that decision. So you do not need to decide today on if you're planning on administering Acadians math. We want an accurate count, so we want to give you time to go back to your LEA leadership and determine what the plans are for your LEA. Okay, I'm going to move over to our June board meeting, but if we continue to have questions about the early numeracy assessment, again, Jared will be talking about this a little bit as well with the survey, so we'll come back to that in just a bit. But coming up in our June board meeting in a couple of weeks, we have a couple of things for assessment that will be discussed. The first is some changes that are being made to R277404, which is our general administration assessment requirement for state assessments. The biggest change in 404, there was a few things that we were cleaning up, like the requirement to administer the civics, or excuse me, the civics assessment. That was still in 404, that was removed. We are removing a new draft has to be brought forward, but removing the description of the high school assessment for Utah Aspire Plus. That will no longer be a part of 404, and it'll just be that RISE is the administration that we give for 3 through 10. But the biggest change to 404 comes because of changes with House Bill 502. House Bill 502 was a new law that really was talking about attendance and attendance for students, but there's a requirement in 502 for the board to offer test out for students that are believe it's not necessarily the packet route, so it's not for credit recovery. It's more for students that don't need to attend a course that can show kind of like clepping out, that they can show that they already have knowledge of that concept or the standards that would be taught in that course and could test out of that course and receive credit without actually taking the course. So there's a requirement to develop assessments or portfolio rubrics to allow students to test out and be given credit for a course. So that's something that is being changed in R277404. The requirement for that test out option is to have those tests and rubrics available for the 27-28 school year. So we're working with teaching and learning and CTE to look at what we already have available for a test out option, what needs to be created, and then we'll be putting together a plan and bringing together educators to help us with that test out option for courses. So that's one of the biggest changes that's coming to 404. That's going to be discussed in the June board meeting. And then additionally, we made some significant changes to the parental exclusion forms. You can see those posted on the board's website under the agenda for that topic for the parental exclusion forms. Namely, in the secondary setting, we were removing the UA Plus assessments and updating that with the RISE assessments. We also added the DLM benchmarks because they're not called benchmarks, but the things that are similar to benchmarks. Those were added to the parental exclusion forms. So there's a couple of things that were added on there that will be discussed and voted on at the June board meeting. Okay, I see a couple of questions. Oh, thanks, Jared, for putting the differences about the licenses in the chat. Will the early numeracy status and intervention requirement be removed from the state info page beginning the 26-27 school year? Yeah, we are making updates to the early numeracy information that's on our website, as well as what's on like teaching and learning and what's included from their side. There were changes in 406 to the early learning plan. That was the other thing that was changed this month in the May board meeting, that the changes and removal of the early literacy plans, early learning plans was removed from code, so that was removed in rule. Okay, so Julie, does that mean parents can't opt out of DLM? No, no, no. It means parents can still opt out of DLM. So the DLM summative assessment was still on the parental exclusion form. We added the benchmark like options for DLM because like RISE benchmarks are listed on the parental exclusion form. So after consulting with Tracy, she was like, really, these are other assessments. So if they want to opt out of they can continue to opt out of the DLM assessment, but then also add the the benchmark like assessments that are available in DLM as well. Okay, when will the 26,
So
27 parental exclusion forms be posted on the USBE website? They will be posted as soon as they're approved from the board. So they'll go to the full board in the June board meeting, which I believe is June, let's see, 4th. So on June 4th, they'll be presented. As soon as the board approves them, we can have them posted within the next day on our website and we can update those. So hopefully by like either the first or second week of June, just depending on if the board approves the forms, which it was a unanimous approval to move it forward in the committee meeting, in the standard assessment committee meeting. It was unanimous. So hoping that it passes and we can get those updated for you all as well early June. Okay, any other questions? Board meeting. Oh, let's see, one more. Okay, might be putting the cart before the horse, but currently K9 LEA is classified for the school report card as a middle school with the ninth grade assessment data excluded. Will the change adding ninth to RISE change this? Good
I
question.
can answer that.
Okay, thank you, Brittany.
So what will happen in this case on the school report card, it will have a tab up at the top where you can see the accountability for seventh and eighth, and then there will be a separate tab for the ninth grade. They won't show it all together, but you would be able to toggle back and forth to see the accountability for each group.
Perfect. Thank you, Brittany. Okay, next slide, Emily, is our TAC update. We had a TAC meeting a couple of weeks ago, our technical advisory committee. There was just a couple of things on the agenda for this TAC meeting. The biggest one was an update for our Utah schools for the deaf and the blind, and we had Darren Nilsson, who was named as the superintendent of USDB, come with a couple of the other staff from USDB to talk through assessments and options and updates for USDB and thinking through assessment things. There were some recommendations for them to move forward with an assessment audit and determine what assessments they're utilizing currently and how those can continue to be used if there are other assessments outside of our state mandated assessments or things that provide good information for them or not. So that was the next steps and recommendations from the TAC to them. And then we also had Cambium present. We requested that they provide some data mockups or data visualizations of things that were available and started to think through some options that could be shown in the Cambium system. So not necessarily on Data Gateway, but in the Cambium reporting system. So no, they were just recommendations at this point, no specific requirements, but things that we'll continue to discuss for our technical advisors. And then the next slide, one of the other things preparing for the APAC meeting, one of the questions we asked you all last month was to consider for next year, so for the new high school assessments that are course-based in spring of 27, would you want to include the secondary math 3 students, students who are taking secondary math 3, and require them to take the secondary math 2 assessment? There are pros and cons. We had a lot of discussion about this. So one of the things we did to prepare for the Assessment Accountability Policy Advisory Committee was to look at data over the last couple of years on the Utah Aspire Plus, which is the 10th grade math test is aligned to secondary math 2 standards, but all 10th grade students took Utah Aspire Plus 10th grade. So we wanted to look over the last 3 years. How did the students who were enrolled in a secondary math 3 course do on the 10th grade Utah Aspire Plus math test, which is aligned to secondary math 2. So you can see the total number of students that were tested right around 36 to 4,000 students, 3,600 to 4,000 students participated that were enrolled in secondary math 3 courses, but took 10th grade UA plus, which is SM2 aligned. And then you can see their proficiency rates. So in 2023, 81% of the students either were at or above, so a 3 or a 4 on Utah Aspire Plus 10th grade. Up until 2025, it was 83% of the students that were enrolled in secondary math 3 got a proficient score on the assessment. So one of our questions was, do students that are not participating in that course still remember what they were taught from the year before when they participated in secondary math 2? So you can see the data from the assessment there. That was something that we shared with our policy advisors. And then on the next slide is the survey responses. Now, previously, when we asked you all about science and continuing to administer the ACT science assessment, we had 127 or 123 responses. Um, with this, for this question about should secondary math 3 students in ninth or 10th grade be enrolled or required to take the secondary math 2 test next year when we move to being course-based? You can see the responses here. They were pretty split, pretty close to even, but we only had 21 responses to this survey. So it wasn't as big of a response as we had on the ACT science question. So this is data that we presented to APAC as well. It was pretty split of yes or no, should they be required or can they enroll, and should they be included in accountability? So a lot more people thought no than yes on the inclusion and accountability, but slightly more people thought yes, they should be allowed to take the assessment. So we presented all of this data to our policy advisors, in addition to some other things. So on the next slide, Emily, is our the topics that we discussed at APAC and the outcomes of those discussions. So the first question on high school assessment and requiring SM3 students to take the SM2 test just for next year. We're hoping that by the 28 year, we'll have new math standards and we'll have a whole new bank of questions developed for SM3 to be able to participate for the 28 administration. But for spring of 27, it was there was nobody that spoke in favor. So we not necessarily an official vote, but nobody really spoke in favor of the SM3 students being required to take the SM2 test. So at this point, we're not going to enroll students and we're not going to have them participate in in an assessment. The students who are in 10th grade or ninth grade actually that are enrolled in an SM3 course in the spring of 27 will not be participating in an assessment. But then the following year in spring of 28, we will have, hopefully, as long as the math standards get approved within the next couple of months-ish, then we'll have new math assessments for all grades in spring of 28, including an SM3 assessment. Then the other question was about high school science enrollment and courses and who should be enrolled to participate in different assessments. This, we had some pretty lengthy discussion about particularly students who are enrolled in like AP Biology, AP Chem, IB Biology, anyway, the AP, IB, CE courses, and should those courses participate in the general chemistry, physics, or biology course assessment for RISE starting next year. There was a lot of questions about what should or shouldn't be required, and so this one is something that APAC has asked us to get some more modeling and some more data and bring that back to our November meeting to help decide which courses should be enrolled to take the RISE assessments. Okay, question from Hal. Are we required to have high school growth indicator? It is not possible to have a really valid measure. Would love to drop that for science, to have a growth indicator for science. So the requirement for science, Utah has a little bit of a different requirement that our code requires more assessing in science than the federal requirement. So federally, we're only required to assess once in high school, but our state requires us to assess every year in high school for science. Um, so as far as considering growth and what that means when we have different assessments, um, when we've talked with our technical advisors in the past, they talk often about how they can equate and make that growth happen from course to course because we're looking at cohorts of students and how they did from assessment to assessment. So it's something that we've discussed with our TAC in the past. It's something that we can continue to look at where we have different and continue to discuss with our TAC about recommendations for calculating growth for science. So there are some differences with federal requirement versus state requirement on actual assessing. But it's something that we can continue to discuss. I know it's in the past how we had done things previously when we had course-based assessments in high school, back in the SAGE days. But it's definitely something we can continue to discuss with our technical advisors. But yeah, for the high school science and which courses should be enrolled in the different assessments, we are looking into some modeling and into some more data to provide to the APAC in November. So I know that's a little bit late. People won't know once the school year starts, like people who are enrolled in an AP biology class um, may or may not be participating in RISE at the end of the year. So yeah, so looking at the cohorts of students that are participating in those assessments instead of the actual content of the assessments, which is similar to what we did with the change from with what's been done with in the past from eighth grade Rise to ninth grade Utah Aspire Plus, where it was different assessments. We were still able to calculate growth because we're looking at cohorts of students. But agree, I understand that that's moving from one math to another math or one science to another science. So I think there's definitely room for continued discussion on that for sure about accountability and growth calculation. Um, okay, and then let's see. Let me make sure I'm on the right spot. Okay, ACT science was another discussion. So with ACT Science, there was unanimous support from the APAC people, as well as, like we presented last month, really strong support to continue to administer the ACT Science in our statewide administration. So the plan for next year and moving forward with ACT is to continue at our statewide administrations to administer the science assessments and to maintain that in Utah. We're still planning on using the science assessments as in accountability for students that are in 11th grade. If a student participates in a national assessment date for ACT, they would not be automatically administered the science assessment. That would be an optional thing that the students would pay extra for if they do the national test. But as far as for Utah, the decision was unanimous from APAC that we continue to administer science for ACT. We talked with Yushi and the higher education folks and questions about utilizing the STEM score at the higher education level, as well as some of their how they utilize the composite score and the ACT composite score for some preliminary entry into different courses as a requirement. So it's something that Yushi's continuing to talk about. They'll continue to talk about that at their fall meeting, I believe is in October, with the higher education folks to discuss changes to ACT and how the composite score no longer includes science and what that means for their preliminary entry into different courses and that students would be taking in higher ed. So we'll get a report back from USHE about their recommendations for how they're utilizing changes with the ACT. But as far as state administration for Utah, next year we will continue to administer the science with the ACT statewide administration. And then the last topic with APAC was we spent quite a few minutes talking about accountability topics and some of the requests for changes. There were three or four main discussions that we had, but really the ultimate change, there were several that were not planned to change with accountability, but one was that they wanted to revisit the ATSI exit criteria and a couple of requests from the APAC group were that we investigate other states' exit criteria because Utah's exit criteria seem to be more rigorous than other states. So looking into what other states use for their exit criteria for ATSI, and then also to model some approaches for what additional differences might be to the exit criteria for ATSI and come with some data. So the plan was to revisit that topic in the November APAC meeting. So ATSI is one of the school improvement terms. It is, I can't remember the A. I can't remember what it stands for. It's one of the designations for the school improvement.
Additional,
Brittany, you got it.
yeah, additional targeted school intervention.
Thank you. So for school improvement, the measures of ATSI, TSI, CSI, Springboard, Elevate, all of those terms for different schools that are involved in school improvement. Okay. And then I need to revisit. I think I said something, but I'm not sure. I've got to revisit the notes about the different science courses and who's assessing for what. So I need to revisit my APAC notes and make sure I've got that correct. But we will continue to discuss the high school science for sure, particularly if a student participates in multiple science courses in a single year. We'll be looking at that. Um, and then I've got to double check the votes on what people said about course alignment and which courses to participate in. So I'll double check on that and then come back. But I think that's my last slide. Any other questions? Okay, Brian, does APAC require a board vote or is the final word on ACT in secondary math 3? Yeah, so there are some things that require a board vote, and there are other things that the APAC can provide recommendation, and then we move forward with those. So for these two specifically, they do not require a board vote. The policy advisors can give us recommendations, and then they are recommendations. So when we look at board policy 5002 that looks at the APAC group. The APAC does provide recommendations. So it's not necessarily that what they say is final, but they do provide recommendations. If USBE decides to go a different direction from APAC, we'd have to have some pretty solid reasoning as to why, if we're not moving forward with the recommendation from the group. But in these cases, for both ACT Science and Secondary Math 3, with those recommendations, we're moving forward and not required to get a board vote for those ones. Okay, I think that's my last slide. If there are other questions, I'll watch the chat and make sure to respond to those if other things come up. But I think Scott's up next.
Think so too. Yay. First slide is testing ethics training update. The online Canvas course is available online as long as the instructor doesn't have any more hacking happen. So it's available for people to sign up for and take using the link that I've got there or this URL. And so people can take a look at it, go through the training and earn the certification if you need. But do remember, as it says in the next slide, that anyone that takes this before July 1st is going to have to retake it anyway for the next school year. And so the requirement is for every school year, every educator who proctors any state assessment must complete that before they proctor any assessments. I'm going to say that again, before they proctor any assessments. And I say that because we get so many reports of teachers going, oh yeah, I took that in April, right before I did RISE. Well, they've also proctored other assessments. It's something that needs to happen before they proctor any assessments. Before the school year starts is even better. And so people have asked, well, what about the previous online training? Is that still going to be available? And the answer is yes. We're going to keep that available too. Not everyone has access to Canvas. And that's so we're going to have the previous training up there. And some of you may prefer, instead of having teachers do this by themselves, that they actually take and you do it in a group. And that way you can filter questions. And so we've actually got that there. So moving forward, we'll pop that link in the chat in a few minutes. I'm already past that on my slides. The next one, we put this out as in the 80 memo. There was a grading error on a grade 10 scoring item. and the data was supposed to be sent tomorrow to us for UA Plus. After talking with Pearson, um, the decision was made to go back and rescore this item that was scoring incorrectly. What this means is 2,500 students will receive an increase in the score if they paid attention to their instantaneous score. They'll get a report that shows they actually got a higher score than what they thought. But so May 28th, next week, is when we're going to be getting the data. And someone asked me before, well, can we get all the data except for the grade 10 stuff? And the answer is no. All the data comes in one file, and we're stuck with that. So it's all going to be coming on the 28th. Sorry about the delay, but we're doing what we can. So LEAs will not get a complete list of who completes the training through Canvas. I don't believe that's an option, but each educator will get a certificate that says they've completed the course, and it's their responsibility to turn that into their administrators at their school, so you have that record on file. We say you're supposed to keep those. We recommend you keep those as long as that educator is employed by your district or your LEA. You can scan those and keep them as a PDF. You don't have to keep a whole bunch of paper in a file. And so that's not a problem either. The training ethics has been put into the chat. Thanks, Sam. And so moving forward, if there's no other questions on that, yeah, the in-person is still an option, Patrick. Absolutely. That'll still be available on our website. We have no desire to take that down. Like we said, some people prefer in person. That's fine. Either way works. And so moving forward, we have a request from schools that test remotely. And so this next slide is not one we generated. It was actually generated by someone who works at our remote schools who would like to be able to coordinate and collaborate with other people who do remote testing. And so if you're interested in collaborating with other people who do remote testing, bouncing ideas off of each other on how to make that more effective, there's a QR code here that you can scan and link to that information. This is not, like I said, it's not a slide that we did. Can you see who does the online training as well? Like I said, I don't believe that's an option, Patrick. It's up to the people who take it to bring their administrators that certificate. Okay. I don't even know if I can see from USBE who else taken the training. I have access to the training, but I don't have permission to make any changes on it. And I don't have those levels of permission. It's someone else here at USBE that takes care of that. So let's go to the next slide where that QR code is. There it is. That way, you remember Sandra sent out the slide deck. You've got access to this also in the slide deck. But scan that QR code if you're interested in joining this discussion and collaborating on remote testing. We've had a lot of interesting issues on remote testing this year. One of the biggest ones being a very large, extremely large number of students who are not getting the training test before they log in to take the summative. And so we're going to be looking at some of our language around that to make sure that it's exceptionally clear that that has to happen before a student starts taking the summative. I would say the majority of the issues we had to deal with were technical problems because people did not do the training test first as kind of a beta test to make sure all those technical things were working. But this is a great opportunity for people who do remote testing to collaborate with one another. And we know from collaboration, we get more effective. And so we're happy to support that. And that's pretty much all I got. We go to Malia next.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott and Emily. I'm going to start us out. Okay, so we wanted to bring some information to you guys this morning about participation codes. So go ahead, next slide. So it is really important that we ensure that you guys are getting participation codes entered accurately in the assessment systems for students. And one of the reason why this impacts specifically our students with disabilities is we have what is called our Special Education Annual Performance Report, APR, where one of those indicators at the state level and also at the district level is indicator 3, which is results of our students with disabilities in our statewide assessments. And that includes the percentage of our students participating with disabilities in our statewide assessments as well as proficiency. And so, some of you that have been around for a while have heard me talk about this quite a bit. This is used in 1% data stuff that we do for that regulation. So it really is imperative that we get those codes in. So as accountability comes down for special education, we have ways to look at what's going on with participation and make some action plans. So linked here are just a couple resources for you if you want to know more about the annual performance report. So this is something the state gets a rating every year as to how we're performing in these indicators, as well as your LEA specifically then gets a rating, what we call results-driven accountability. And then there's lots of things that go into that. One big difference that has happened in the last couple of years is we report grades 9 and 10 combined as a high school indicator for our assessments in APR and RDA. So not just grade 10, we combine 9 and 10 into high school. So, okay, go ahead, next slide. So just kind of a recap on what we do with annual performance determination. So this is actively going on across the state right now with your special education directors. Every year they get their annual performance determination on how they're doing on all of these indicators. And again, indicator 3 is our assessment. And then they receive an overall determination from the state of whether or not they need intervention or substantial intervention, or they don't need any intervention at all, and they're doing well in all of those various indicators. I believe there's 15 or 16 indicators that are included in this APD. And so right now these sessions are happening. If any of your LEAs are in a needs intervention or need substantial intervention, status, they're required to attend what we call APD data and inclusive strategies planning sessions, and they're required to craft a formal plan and address the areas of need. And so one of the big focuses that we have is instructional practices, and how we are measuring those outcomes for students is our assessment data. And so we provide them a really robust set of data in these sessions, including participation codes for them to really dig into what's going on. And so we want you aware of that. We've held a couple already. We've got more going throughout the summer. So if you are curious if this is something going on, please check in with your special education director and find out if they need any support with this. I know that we've seen some of you ADs already in those sessions with your special education director, and we quite often point them back to you folks when they have really specific data needs. Okay, go ahead, next slide. So participation code. So we need to ensure that every student in RISE, Utah Spire Plus, we understand that there was some missed Utah Spire Plus codes this year. So that will have an impact for next year when your special ed directors try to dig into participation. But we need to ensure that those are in before those systems close and are accounted for, so that we can kind of aggregate and dig in and figure out what's going on with participation. And then they are needed, participation codes are needed for students who exit school early in a testing window. So it is advised that you enter those participation codes. So if the student exits, they're in that testing window, they haven't participated, that you get that entered, so they don't get lost in that shuffle. Okay, next slide. And I think this is where Malia is going to jump in on what we do with this.
Sure. Yeah. So there's a lot of awareness about how participation codes impact the state accountability, but the EdFacts data, which is what's used for all of these special ed accountability items, assessment items, has different rules. And so the next couple of slides are going to clarify some of those differences, and then also talk about one of the big ones that we get questions on. So when we look at students who are expected to test according to the EdFacts rules, but did not test and don't have a participation code, we code those students as having an unknown reason for non-participation. And so that's where you've probably had your special ed director reach out to you and say, hey, why are these kiddos listed as unknown for their non-participation reason? So a lot of the times it's the students who just don't even make it into a test system. So with RISE, because it's course-based rostering, that'll mean probably that they don't have a course code that triggers a test. And really, we shouldn't see this in Utah Aspire Plus because it's triggered by their grade level, but we still have students who are enrolled during the test window and have grade 9, grade 10 reported, but yet they have no Utah Aspire Plus tests. And so we need to dig into that and find out what's the reason for all of these unknown non-participants and try to tackle that, try to get more of these kiddos actually taking tests. Um, and so for indicator 3, it's just a participation rate, but we do encourage LEAs to dig into that reason for non-participation to try to improve participation, and you'll be better equipped to improve that participation if you know the reason why the student was a non-participant. For our annual performance determinations, which is, you can think of that as your IDEA accountability, we actually have a measure in there that we include where we look at the 3 major categories of non-participation, and then all other categories of non-participation are lumped into an other group. So there's 4 groups of non-participation data, and we look at what's the state mean and what are the LEA rates, and then what's the standard deviation. And if an LEA is more than 1 standard deviation above the state in that reason for non-participation, they get flagged for that non-participation reason. And so then that'll really get your special ed director looking into that data and probably reaching out to you and saying, hey, I got flagged for my non-participation rate of unknown or opt-out or absent or other being more than 1 standard deviation above the state rate. Help me dig into these students and figure out why we have such a high non-participation rate in this area. Okay, next slide, please.
So there's some questions in the chat.
Okay.
So it sounds like Ashley at APD, your group had some conversations around participation and trying to get some information out to parents about how it is teachers that come together to create the questions, and that there is a parent review. I don't know. I think Sid and Brittany and Scott, maybe that's something that we could consider, is putting together like some sort of one pager. Um, NCEO, I just attended an NCEO thing yesterday around why participation matters, and they have some model stuff. So I think, Ashley, we can take that back internally. If you have an interest in what NCEO has out that you could then take and use some stuff internally at your district, please send me an email and I can send you those links. We do know that, yes, Nikki, we do have, the parent opt-out piece, and that's in place. We know that. However, you would be surprised at the number of LEAs and more so in the world of special education, right? We help dig into that data. I've had quite a few LEAs over the years that came to the table and we dug into their participation data and they thought it was going to be opt out, and they found out that that was not the largest percent of their non-participants. So digging into this data is really kind of an aha for districts because they think they have this notion of what's happening. And again, I think, having those conversations about why testing is important, and what we can do about that. I had a conversation with a parent a couple years ago that was, I got called into a meeting with parents and the LEA special education director and staff, and we were engaging in conversations in other areas besides assessment. But at the end of it, the parent asked me, like, oh, you're the assessment person. Can you tell me, like, why should I have my kiddo take a test? And I was like, we just spent an hour discussing placement and instruction for your kiddo and what was going to be best. And the outcome you wanted was like a college bound student. And you're going to take ACT. Like, why would you not engage them in those other tests to build even that capacity? And they hadn't thought about it that way. So there's multiple things you can do. But I think we can take that back state and see what we can produce. But shoot me an email if you want some resources that I know are available that you could pull from to craft your own stuff. Okay, let's see. Our school also has very high opt-out, students not showing up for testing. Again, that's where if we get these codes incorrectly, we can dig deeper into that data and specifically look at those numbers to then think about like how we can address those specific situations. Parents on why Rise matters. Yes, Teresa. Okay, what am I missing here? Kids who just don't show up. So, I mean, one thing we discovered is like, digging into your makeup testing practices. What are we doing to get makeup tests done for those kids that, hey, we're taking Rise test today, I'm not going to show up. So I think, internally looking at what you guys are doing for that and scheduling, could be helpful how you are, engaging in those conversations school wide. What else have I missed? Okay. That looks like that's all testing ethics stuff, right? Did I miss any other questions, anybody?
I think you've
Okay.
got them all. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so some of the key difference between state accountability and EdFacts, first of all, those opt-outs. So while the opt-outs can be excluded in the participation rate denominator for ESSA, for EdFacts, we cannot exclude them. So though all of those students are unfortunately going to count as non-participants. Second, the students who don't complete a test, but they do complete enough of the test where they get coded as a 200 a participant, and the term in our state accountability is sufficient response. So those students can count as a participant in ESSA or state accountability, but in EdFacts, the student has to have a valid proficiency score to count as a participant. So unfortunately, those students are also counted as non-participants. And then, yeah, so then with EdFacts, the rules in EdFacts are pretty plain and clear that any student who's enrolled during the testing window is expected to test in all 3 subject areas. We do make a few exceptions, so that's on the next slide, I believe. Okay, so first of all, for our rostering, if a student has a resident status code that indicates that they're a foreign exchange student, so that's a F or a J, they don't get sent to test rostering, so we exclude them from expected to test for EdFacts. Part-time students, if the student is reported in UTREX with a part-time code, so those are H for students who are homeschool students enrolled part-time in a LEA, P is private school students, and S is Students, usually high school, 11th, 12th graders, S stands for stable. A student might just be attending part-time. That also gets used for students who have split enrollment in two different LEAs. So each of the LEAs should be marking the student as S to indicate that the student isn't taking all three subject areas in your LEA and therefore should not be expected to test in all three subject areas in your LEA. So what we do with part-time students for regular assessments for RISE and Utah Aspire Plus is if the student has one of these part-time codes, then we look at their course codes and we only put them as expected to test in the denominator for the participation rate that they have courses in that subject area, courses that would trigger a test in that subject area. We can't do that for DLM because DLM doesn't really have courses that are really specifically aligned to testing. It's just that is 1% flag in their Scrum record. So if a student who is a student with the most significant cognitive disability marked as is 1% in their Scrum record is actually only enrolled part-time in your LEA, they're still going to get rostered in DLM for all three subject areas, and they're going to get put in the participation denominator for all three subject areas. The 103 participation code for EdFacts, if they have that code, they are not they're not gonna count against you for participation in language arts if they haven't taken a test. However, those students are expected to test in math and science. So even if you mark that 103 participation code, if they haven't taken a math or science test, then they're going to count as non-participants. And then the participation code of 107, that one is actually explicitly listed in the EdFacts specifications that they aren't expected to take a test. Next slide, please. Okay, and it looks like Maureen answered this last question. So participation codes. So again, as I said earlier, that in order to be included as a participant, the student has to have a proficiency level assigned. So if they completed part of the test, but not enough to get a proficiency level, we won't be able to count them as a participant. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, any more questions? Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks, Malia. So if anything else pops up, Malia, Jessica, or even myself, we can help navigate that. And yeah, reach out to your special ed directors and see if they have any questions, if they haven't gotten with you already. That would be great. Thank you.
Oh, that's me. Sorry, I was unprepared. All right, we just have a few announcements about
Hold
roster.
on, Maureen. Hold on, sorry. One question just came in. Do we let a student go over the allotted time? So in RISE, Stacy, this is a big one, and I get a lot of questions around this, and Jessica does too, especially for RISE. It's not a timed test. There's a recommended amount of time of what the expected time should be for students. But if students are actively engaging in testing and moving through, we should not be cutting them off. In fact, I told my gen ed student that if your teachers at your school tells you that you have to stop and you have not finished, you come tell mom. And so like we need to ensure that we are allowing students to complete that testing. And so again, I know that you schedule them into these windows and these slots, but how are we accounting for those students that need more time, making up tests, and things like that? And so if If they're just sitting there and not navigating through, you can reach out to Jessica or myself. We help handle those on case by case situations. If you've got student on IEPs with that extended time, like please feel free to reach out and navigate those. When were these expected testing times last reviewed based on how long students are now taking statewide on each assessment? I'm not quite sure, Sid or Teresa, if that's something you guys can answer.
Yeah, I believe it's been quite some time. So that's a good question, Cassidy. I know for sure, we did with the writing, we reviewed those back in like 2015, 16. So it's been over a decade on the writing, and where we have new writing assessments, for sure that'd be a good thing to look at. As far as the other, I know we haven't done it since we updated the ELA blueprints, so I believe that'd probably be a good thing for us to look into of analyzing the amount of time students are spending on the assessment compared to proficiency levels, which is something we've done in the past, but it's been several years. So I think thanks for bringing that up. I think that's something we can look at again.
I will just add that I do know that we were looking at some writing testing times and looking at it, definitely adjusting for writing, but I think it's definitely worth looking at for ELA and science as well. And then math when we make changes with the math is.
Okay, perfect. And then Leslie, we've had a SPED student. So student would not engage past 10 to 20% after several hours. Do we code that? And so this is where it gets tricky because we have different rules on how we consider a student a participant, not a participant. And I've engaged in those conversations before with like if there are behavior things, maybe our goal is to get partway through this year, we increase that over the years in that capacity. So we're not here to torture anybody. If you have special ed students that are refusing to test and they're not moving through and engaging, you need to have a conversation with the IEP team, please, and make sure parents are informed. And the team, I think at that point needs to kind of come together to make a decision on what we're doing here. I believe it's 6 questions and they're considered a participant for state accountability. And we probably would want to let that lie and then just note they're going to land in that non-participant bucket. And hopefully you're tracking that. Your school can account for that. So if somebody comes and asks, but you should definitely be engaging those IEP teams in that and reaching out to Jessica for those questions. And we always say students will refuse to test, and we navigate that, and we're not here to torture anybody. And the clusters, how so clusters have changed time. I think content teams accounted for that. It's tricky when providing pacing is ethically not allowed. I don't know, Teresa, if anybody or Scott, like I'm not quite sure about that.
Yeah,
What you mean by when
pacing
pacing
is referring to like saying you're going to complete 10 items today or 20 items today and then complete 20 items the next day, and that like students are allowed to go at the pace that they want to go at and that they need to go at.
Mm.
Again, I think it's looking at those unique circumstances like Tracy talked about and discussing if you aren't confident, reaching out to USBE to navigate those conversations and what do we do and what does it look like and how do we code that student, or do we do a parent opt-out? Like what are our options and what is the best way to address this concern?
And I would not encourage parent opt-out at that point. So if we've got a student and we are on an IEP and we know that there's some behavior stuff and we're working through those things, like I please do not encourage parent opt-out. It does not help anybody. There's other ways that we can navigate those situations. And we do talk about bringing some of those behavior components into play. So Rachel, again, those are like really specific, I think, use cases where you can reach out to Jessica or myself and we can navigate that. And so like for your average kid, you're not going to be in that space, but we've got those one-offs. How do we handle click-through testers? There's not a lot you can do that, Amanda. Again, if you've got an IEP component, and our special ed kids, like, reaching out to Jessica in those nuances. At the end of the day, we're trying to get to independent decisions. We want to know where kids are at. And so, like, there's always an exception to every rule. So I think, and I've watched it. There's those kids that are going to click through. And if they click through, they click through, and there's not much we can do that. I've watched plenty of gen ed kids do that in observations too. So there's only so much control we have over things, if that makes any sense. Yeah, I would not suggest opting out. There's other things that we can do to navigate those tricky kiddos, for sure. So, okay. And again, please email Jessica or I, like, we engage in these like conversations all the time, all the time. So, I had one last week where a kiddo was refusing to interact with the computer, and they put it up on a whiteboard, tested one-on-one, and the kid zipped through and completed it. So there's always ways to help navigate. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
All right. No. Oh, all right. So assessment rostering. Next slide. All right, I'm right in the middle of doing our read to access state data validation. It ends May 26th. That is next Tuesday. So if you have any issues that you need to, that you are aware of that need fixing, please email me definitely before next Tuesday. And try to get to me before Friday, because I'm submitting on Tuesday and it's a 3-day weekend. So we need to get cracking on those issues. Any of those, if you have students that are missing results, if you have students that have multiple records that need merging, if you have students that inadvertently had do not score codes added to their results, I can fix any of those things during the data validation window. So please let me know if you have any students in that situation. And then once I finish with that, new reports will be posted in DRC on June 11th. Also, if you returned some materials late, you should see reports for those students May 26th in DRC. Next slide. All right. For RISE testing, we have paused the nightly sync to type because a lot of schools are starting to get to the end of their school year. So we don't want to lose a bunch of student data. So if you have any issues with students, like maybe you had some fatal errors, students with fatal errors on their records, or just students that are missing out of TIE, just let me know and I can get in touch with Cambium and we can get your students manually fixed and back on rosters. Next slide. All right, so we're on an accountability. Accountability is our thing today. The assignment of student assessment results and the rostering process are two completely different processes. Students that roster with you, that you test, might not get their results assigned to you. Students that don't roster with you and are assessed, their results might be assigned to you. We take in all these different factors to determine where student assessment results are assigned. We just went through a big discussion about this, so I won't go through all of this, but you can find all of these requirements in the accountability technical manual. I have a link at the bottom of the slide to that manual. Please read it. It's full of really good information. Next slide. All right. Now that we're totally done with 2026 assessments, it's time to start thinking about next year already. We need to prepare for a cadence reading. It's the first thing a lot of people do when they get back to school. But there are some things you need to do before the school year starts to make sure your students roster as quickly as possible once you get your classes started. So before the July rollover of ALO, here's some things you need to do. You need to make sure any non-teacher users that you expect to be with you next school year, their accounts need to be protected so that they remain after the rollover. If you have teacher accounts that are protected, you need to unprotect those so that they can move if a teacher changes positions so that they can be moved on to their next school. Also, it will be very helpful if you let us know when your first day of classes is going to be, so that we can be prepared. As soon as you start classes, we can start the processes that we need to do in ALO to get students rostered. So I have just a small little form for you guys to fill out, that you can tell us what your first day of classes are. I have a link here on this slide. I'll drop it in the chat when I'm done talking to you. It's just a quick, what's your LEA? When are you starting classes? That's some really helpful information for us. After the rollover, which is July 5th, the rollover happens, but you can have access to ALO for the new school year after July 15th. You need to set your school year dates and your test calendar. Your students don't roster in ALO until you do this step. It's very, very important. We can do everything on our side to get your UTREX going, but if you haven't set those dates, your students don't roster. And then you can expect your students to hit ALO on their third day of class. If we do all these steps, it is possible it could be the second day. I cannot promise anything, no promises, but definitely the third day if all of these steps have been followed. If you have set your dates and your UTREX submission is good, the third day, you should be good to go. Next slide. And that's it for me. Usual resources, those core code lists will be updated for next school year, and I'm hoping to get them in there in June. And your student rostering manual has all the business rules and your private homeschool student rostering. Can we set the dates now? You cannot. We're still in this school year for in ALO, so you have to wait till after the rollover to set those dates. Okay, we have teacher. Yes. So any changes we made this year, the question is, will we have teacher names on rosters? Yes. You will see the same format for class names going forward that we have this year. Okay, our school is under construction and our first day may be pushed back a week. Is that okay? Yes. We just need to know what the first day is so we can be ready for you when you're ready to go. So that shouldn't be a problem. Is the state paying for the reading licenses? Yes, reading is not changed. All right. And if there's no further questions, that's it for me. Thanks, everybody.
I still see one more question in the chat.
For math, it's going to roster the same way as it has been. If you don't have the licenses thing is not my jam. Students will roster exactly the same way for math as they have in previous years.
Yeah, so Amanda, the ALO system is going to automatically roster students into math. You just won't have licenses unless you have requested those from us. So you won't be able to enter in the data unless you're planning on administering.
All right, I'm trying to give sufficient wait time just in case. We have a thank you for that explanation. All right, well, I suppose if more questions come up, we can address them as we go. Okay, Wida, here we go. First is an opportunity for a limited number of LEAs to complete a survey concerning accessible pathways. So this is a project that WIDA is conducting to better understand and support our MLs with low incident disabilities so students who are blind or have low vision, or students who are deaf or hard of hearing. So very specific to these two groups, okay? Um, so the ask is if you are an LEA that has MLs that are blind or have low vision, or MLs that are deaf or hard of hearing, they really want to hear from you. It is a slightly longer survey. It's about 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how detailed you get in your responses. But the survey does not ask for any student PII or anything like that. It's just general characteristics, including communication modes, use of language, and access to instruction. So while this is a very small group of students, we know not every LEA has these students, we really need as many people responding to this survey as possible to give good feedback and be good thought partners as we try to meet the needs of this very specific group of students. So the link is on here, and I will get that link once I am done presenting my slides and pop it in the chat as well. Tracy will also be bringing this to the SPED directors as well. So we're going to be hitting both groups. And then I will also be bringing it to the ALS directors. So again, we really encourage communication within your LEAs to say who is going to be the best person to complete this survey. So this is where your collaboration is key in talking to your other departments to say who's going to be best, or do we do this together to reply and complete this survey. And look at that. Tracy already has it in there for y'all. Tracy, do you want to add anything here?
Yeah, hey, I can request a special email to go out
Oh,
to special ed directors. I do to you guys. So if you could take this slide and please pass that on to your special ed directors, that would be the most helpful. And then I will specifically send this out to USDB for them. And so what WIDA is doing, just so you're aware, they have not allowed sign language on content. The masses of WIDA state partners have spoke very loud and clear about our thoughts on this. So they really are engaging in trying to get things better in alignment for accessibility for this population. They're really working on getting Braille updated and things. So there will be some additional stuff coming out for next year to support these students. And I know I've engaged in some of these tricky conversations with several of you. So the more we can pass this along to help this project with WIDA would be great. So I will attempt to get this to SPED directors, but really we rely on you guys to help us with some of that. But that's it.
and Tracy has already dropped the link to the survey. It says WIDA survey above, but we can repost that as well. And then I also do want to point out that Maureen has dropped the link for her survey as well. So again, just make sure that there seems to be a lot of surveys happening this meeting. So we'll just need to make sure that we keep all of our surveys straight. Okay. All right. Next slide. Okay. This is repeat, but it does bear repeating because I get a lot of questions about this all the time. Again, just like Tracy requested it, we really do rely on you all for communicating with your relevant colleagues when it comes to all this stuff. So you should have received all electronic reports at this point, and then you should have also last week on Friday and then into this Monday received your printed reports. Okay. As you all are going through your reports, taking a look at everything, and you notice any weirdness, discrepancies, as Maureen said, the clock is ticking on getting any of those errors fixed. So we've got to get all of those fixes in. I will say a lot of the errors that we're seeing right now for requests coming in to fix, these are errors in most instances that could have been caught in your LEA level data validation. A lot of them are just simple, the name is spelled wrong or the SSID is wrong, right? Those are all things that if you want accurate data on the first round, that those things are things that can be caught in your own data validation. So it does kind of tell us who's actually doing the data validation and who's not. We really, really ask so you're not held up in the exiting process that you do next year. Really highlight once I release the dates that you really highlight that data validation 2 week time period after testing. Okay. But of course, we are always here as your fail safe, okay? But the clock is ticking down. Marine Friday, essentially tomorrow, is kind of our last day since Monday's a holiday, right?
Yep, and I have to submit on Tuesday, so.
Okay. Like there, I don't want to say there's going to be time on Tuesday morning. So, if this hasn't been looked at or considered, it probably should be a priority today and tomorrow. Okay. And again, we updated the updated data files will be posted to WIDA AMS, that's the DRC side, on the 11th of June. And then again, late reporting, which is not on this slide, I apologize. The first round of late reporting for materials that did get sent in later, that is next Tuesday as well, I believe.
It's the 28th. I think it's
Oh, the
Thursday.
28th. Okay, apologies, the 28th. Now, one question that we have been getting is very bottom of this slide. Remember, LEAs, you are all responsible for updating your SIS. There are so many different SIS in use across the state, and people say, well, what do I mark? What do I press? We are not authorities on all the different SIS. So we always are going to suggest that that you reach out to your SIS help desk. So you're making sure that you are updating the correct things. And Maureen can always let you know. This is also on our website posted. Maureen, it's on your data tab, I believe, the UTREX manual. So you know what actually needs to be updated. So you're syncing correctly with us when it comes to your ML data. So, as far as updating in your SIS, Karen, um, that's a great question. Every SIS works differently. So,
So, scores, you don't need to put scores in your SIS. Sorry. We run reports and scores are put into Data Gateway. We just look at your English language learner status, if there's a monitor entry, date, and previous year scores. So those are the big ones for
the big
Vita
thing is
fostering.
yeah, is the student exited? Did they reach proficiency? Um, or and like when is monitoring starting? Um, Karen, some SIS though, I believe do require when you update, like if a student's exited, I do believe there are some that require you to update the score along with that. But again, every single SIS is different. So I would say talk to your help desk, and we, of course, can be thought partners. And Maureen and I are always here to say, okay, are these students looking correct on our end as well? Okay. Again, it just depends on your SIS. And I'll be honest, for those of you that use the Aspire SIS, um, again, we in assessment, we don't actually have access to that system at all. And so we are constantly being asked, oh, hey, how do we do this in Aspire? Because the state, runs this. But we in assessment don't have that information nor even access to see it. So we would very highly suggest that you reach out to that department. And I believe it is Leonard Brooks that oversees Aspire and his team. So if you have questions about Aspire specifically, that SIS, reach out to that team. All right. Hopefully I've answered questions so far. And then again, with reports on our next slide, this has been an ask because now these dates are very quickly coming per our testing ethics guidelines and expectations. You do need to provide test results within 3 weeks of receiving those. You do have a little flexibility depending on how you share. If it's all electronic and your LEA started that on the April 30th date, then your time is basically up. But if you do paper, snail mail, version, then your time started either Friday or Monday. Okay. There are a lot of resources for understanding your access scores. The link is on this slide again. Just remember as you are starting to exit students that did reach proficiency for this year, please remember that on that exit letter, which is housed on our Title III website under the Forms tab, part of the requirement is to have a conference, right, with the student, the parents, the teachers, to really make sure that you are establishing what monitoring looks like in your LEA and what they can expect during that monitoring period. Please remember though, once the student is exited and they are in monitoring, they are no longer considered an EL, okay, and they no longer take access, okay? So how does that work for the RISE reports? We are done with school before the window closes in June, but some schools still won't be done testing, so the state scores might change. That's not a question for Megan, so I will defer to
I'll
Lisa
just
Scott.
jump in. Just go ahead and still send them because the state scores don't need to be on an ISR.
Okay, any follow-up? Okay, I will post the link for all the forms and exit letters in the chat in a moment too. Can you briefly go over exiting, what we look for in the scores or send link to that information? Okay, so exiting, okay, that is set for the entire state. LEAs do not get to determine what the exit criteria is. This is something that the state establishes in our consolidated state ESSA plan and has to be approved by the U.S. Department of Education. In Utah, what has been established currently is it is an overall proficiency score of 4.2 or higher and a speaking score of 3.5 or higher. So again, both of those have to be met to exit a student. So again, overall 4.2 or higher and speaking of 3.5 or higher. Okay. So, and thank you. Look at this. Everyone's got my back with all the links today in the chat. I'm loving it. I don't have to type anything. Oh, brilliant. So, um, again, for alternate exit, boy, we still don't have approval, but I know Sid's like, but we actually put in a very specific request with USED to say, we need this back by the end of May. Like, timeline's over. Just give it to us. And they're like, we're going to try our best to comply. And so we're all saying prayers and crossing fingers, doing score dances, whatever it is that you need to lean into to get this to happen. We're doing it. We are really, really hoping that we're going to have really good news by the end of this month to say you can start exiting students taking alternate access, and we're going to provide all the guidance and everything. So, again, just put all your big old positive thoughts that way. So, we're almost there. For adequate progress, when will we get the new accountability tables? Oh, Brian. That is part of the ESSA amendment that we are still waiting for approval on. So again, cross your fingers, say your prayers, do your dances, come up with a daily mantra, whatever we need to do to get these all approved, because that's part of it, okay? For the 30 days for the conference to happen, can that happen right at the beginning of the school year since we're receiving scores so late in the school year? This is one area there has been a little flexibility on for that 30-day conference. With the exiting of students per Title III law, because we're right at the end of the school year, and every family's situation over the summers are different, we have said basically 30 school days essentially. So you can, if needed, take that summer into account, okay, for scheduling those conferences. That only pertains to conferences, though, for scheduling the conferences. The exit letters have to go out, okay? They just have to go out this year, especially when it comes for those students and families to be planning for next year, okay? How do we know what our LEA is, paper or electronic? The person I took over this role from says we receive both, and you sure do receive both, so it's your decision. You get them. Those scores have been available since the 30th in AMS, and then you should have already received your paper scores. So it's both, and you get to determine this. All right, y'all are asking some great questions, keeping us on our toes today. Love it. All right. To clarify, I would look at every student score to see if anyone exits. Yep. Every score has to be considered. All right. Title III, I give y'all a lot of homework. Sorry. But, it's good. It's keeping us compliant and doing what we're supposed to for our MLs. All right. Okay, so it's time for our monthly WIDA Did You Know? And as you know, so moving on to our next slide, here we go. Thank you. This is kind of my attempt to clarify things that I'm hearing from the field. And let me tell you, you all bring it, and I love it. And you're keeping me on my toes with this stuff. So the more questions you ask and the more patterns of questions that I start to see, that is what drives my WIDA Did You Know sections. So I have recently had not a ton, but a few LEAs reaching out concerning the speaking domain and their scores. Okay. And so a common question that I've been getting from just a few LEAs is if a student received a score of a 0 or a 1 for the speaking domain, what does that mean? And how does the speaking domain even work, Megan? I'm like, well, let's talk about this. So on this slide, just so you know, I did create kind of a one-pager that has all of the information that we're going to go over on one handout. And of course, you can make a copy and do as you will with it to get it to the masses if there are questions pertaining to this. I will answer the question in the chat in just after we get through the WIDA Did You Know? So the speaking domain. The speaking domain consists of multiple items. We say items, but items are questions, okay? The students have to engage in several items and respond to several items, okay? So it's not just a one chance thing and that's it, right? They should be responding to multiple items. Um, all speaking responses are scored, so anything submitted is scored by a human scorer. And these human scorers are highly trained and they go through calibration exercises multiple times, even during the scoring windows, okay, to ensure that things are happening accurately and consistently across the board for the entire consortium. Um, there also is no penalty, as you know, students. Well, not as you know, if you didn't know, all students are given a certain amount of time to respond to their questions. If a student is cut short by the recording time limit, there is no penalty. Okay, so if they're talking, and their response gets cut off, they don't get penalized for that. Also, if students have maybe some kind of speech concern or issue, such as a stutter or a super heavy accent, the scorers are also highly trained to deal with scoring those. And students that have those occurrences are not penalized in any way as well. Okay. And again, all recordings that are submitted goes to scoring for consideration. Okay. Next part. This is part one. It's really part two. So, when the students engage in the speaking domain, a speech indicator appears in their like whole platform and interface. Okay, and it indicates whether the student's recording is working or not. Right, and so at the very beginning of the speaking domain, there's a sound check functionality that's built right into the testing platform. And this is the first step to ensure that the students' microphones are working and that the audio and what they say is properly recorded. So each time, every single item, even in the practice, okay, the platform will detect whether or not the student's voice is loud enough, okay? So you will see this every time. Even whispers can be picked up, okay? But also because whispers can be picked up, that means lots of background noise can be picked up as well, okay? Next part. Now, if during the practice and platform check before they actually get into scored items, if the student is not speaking loud enough, or for some reason their microphone's not working, the system is going to tell them that. It's going to prompt the student to either re-record, give it a go again, or also say, hey, ask your test administrator for help. Okay. And hopefully that student and the test proctor is proctoring, watching, and checking for all of this, right? Can come and address it. Now, the system is built again with a failsafe. If even a second attempt where this little warning pops up to say this is happening again, a message is going to appear. And again, it's going to say, you need help at this point. And when they say, okay, I get that I need help, it's going to boot the kid out of the entire platform. So they can no longer proceed in the test with a potentially faulty machine, right? So do note though that anything that has been recorded is saved at that point. Okay. Now, if you know you're like, we have had massive issues, some maybe the power went out, we didn't realize this was happening with a student device, you need to reach out to us and or DRC to get through troubleshooting. But if you know that the concern is high enough, after testing's completed is probably not the best time to address it. Address it during the time because we do have the ability to say this student had multiple technology concerns, limiting their ability to properly respond in speaking. We can reset and regenerate that test. Okay. But once testing's closed, we don't have that option. So you have to be really proactive for these students. And that's why proctoring is so essential. Okay. Um, please be a thought partner with us. Okay. And again, a big component to this is your collaboration and communication within your LEAs. Make sure you have processes in place to say, hey, test administrators, if you encounter an issue, you got to be communicating that to us immediately. What does that look like and how is that done in our LEA? Okay. All right, next part. All right, so the last thing that I want to address about the speaking scores um, is as you're starting to look at these scores, okay, please remember the proficiency scores. So that's the 1 through 6 with the tense. A 1.5 or a 2.7, a 3.2, okay, whatever that score is, those are all the exact same as years past. It is mapped to the old proficiency levels. So all the reports you have received so far, those can still be used since Utah determines exiting based on proficiency levels, not scale scores. We determine it only by exit or proficiency, sorry, and that's that 4.2 overall with speaking of 3.5 or higher. You can still exit our kids because it's mapped to the old levels still. Okay. Please be looking at proficiency scores. Do not look at scale scores. Okay. I've been messaging this out as much as I can. The scale is new. Okay. We in Utah are super fortunate because we do not exit based on scale scores, and we also do not calculate growth based on scale scores. So we are really lucky because we can proceed as usual. If your LEA uses scale scores in your own data dives, I love it. Do it, just not this year. Okay? Just don't do it this year because they're not comparable. They're totally different scales. Okay. The standard setting is taking place this summer. And then as that gets approved and everything is rolled out, we will keep you up to date. Okay. But please just do not use scale scores. If a student gets a 0, okay, they're like, they took the test, they got a 0, that actually means that the students didn't actually record one response on the test. Okay. So if they get a 0, that means your student submitted nothing, not even heavy breathing into a microphone. Okay. If your student got a score, okay, of a 1, that means that that is the lowest. Okay. At least one scoreable item was attempted. Okay. Um, so that you could get a 1, meaning like the student only partially completed the speaking domain and there weren't enough items even completed, okay, to give an accurate score. Or the student may have answered all the responses and had a recording, but it could have been super heavy breathing, which we get from time to time. Or they recorded their responses in another language, possibly. We did have someone say, hey, we want you to look into this score. And it turned out the student responded in another language. This is an academic English assessment. So that couldn't be scored, right? Um, Again, active proctoring is key here. If you hear students speaking in another language, you probably should do something about that, right? Or students are just talking about whatever they want to talk about and not even talking about the question or the prompt. Okay. So again, a score means that they've submitted stuff that can actually be scored, may not have enough that they responded to, or may have just disengaged or not done what they were supposed to do. Okay. So now time for questions. What about kinders? If they met the proficiency of speaking and overall, can they be exited and monitored? Yep. Yep. Our exit is K through 12 across the board. Okay. And then getting into screening. I had a student mess up on the screener and he clicked on the wrong answer. He spoke better than a one. What do you do? If you know, so screening, um, this is a unique question, because speaking is graded locally on the screener. You don't actually click on answers, you provide it. So speaking domains, not a multiple choice thing where you can click on a wrong answer. Um, okay, reading, thank you. If you know that the student just messed up and you have like data to back it up and evidence to back it up, you can ask to have that domain regenerated. Just reach out to myself and I can help you with that process. Okay. So if you know there's a reason to invalidate something and reset it and regenerate it, the student will have to take the entire domain over. Okay. But these unique situations happen, right? Um, they shouldn't be happening a ton, right? If we have really good um, test administration happening and proctoring happening and making sure that we're reading the TAM verbatim and the scripts provided. Hopefully these things are not happening on a regular basis. I do believe that would probably be like a little bit of a flag to say, hey, why is one LEA constantly having to reset tests? Um, but yeah, you can 100% reach out. And I apologize that you didn't know that. That information is always in the TAM, though, to say reach out to DRC, reach out to your SEA, which is State Education Agency, aka Megan, and let us know what's happening. Because if we don't know, we can't act on it, right? So just make sure that you all are going through the TAMs, communicating with us. We want to be there to support you, but without your good feedback and questions, we just don't know. Okay. So I hope this all is good, useful information. And like I said on that first slide of Weta, did you know? I did compile all this information in a one pager that you guys can use for your own training purposes or communication purposes. Okay. All right. And then last, um, screening. I know it's already upon us. So do know that all things are going to roll over July 1st. So all administrator training courses will become available July 1st. Remember that test administrators actually giving the test, they do have to complete those trainings annually, but only for the tests that they actually administer. Okay. If you need any paper screeners, again, reach out to me. We have those housed at the state. We can get them mailed out to you. You can begin screening for the upcoming 26-27 school year starting July 1 as well. Okay. And then also do know that July 1, the new accessibility and accommodations manual is also made available, and that is information that pertains to screening as well. Okay. Remember that our entrance criteria is an overall 5 for being proficient, not qualifying for services. A 4.9 or lower does qualify a student for EL services in the state of Utah. Okay. And I think with that, I've chatted a lot today. put Megan on mute. Our contact pages are last, and then any helpful resources. All the information that I always go over with you all in RAD meetings, we do have posted either on the USBE WIDA tab in our assessment section, or it's on Utah's website, housed on the WIDA website. So that is it.
Thank you. Thanks, Megan. And I think we are all ready for a break. So if we could take a quick 8-minute break, we will start back again at 11 o'clock. I know we still have quite a few slides to get through, but give everybody a chance to do bio break and quick stretch because I know we've had a lot of information so far. So we'll take a break until 11 o'clock and resume talking about Acadians at 11. All right, hopefully that gave everyone a chance to stretch their legs for a minute and appreciate the discussion that we've had so far and the feedback that you've all had in the comments and to the USBE folks for what we've presented so far. And ready to jump into Acadians with Dallas and Jared. And I did not check to make sure they were ready yet and back on. So I know we started right at 11 o'clock. So I'll make sure, give them a second just to make sure we've got Dallas or Jared here to present for Acadians.
Yeah, I'm here.
Perfect.
Okay. All right, we can get started. We'll talk Acadians. All right, so this is the thing that Sid talked about earlier today. Um, uh, Based on the board decision, Acadians math is optional for this year, this coming school year. If LEAs decide that they would like to administer Acadians math, then it's up to that decision for kindergarten through third grade. There is a link there that I would like, or we would like, all LEAs to complete, whether you will or won't be administering assessments. If you're not planning on administering assessments, it's just a quick, which LEA are you? And you can just click no, we're not interested in administering Acadians math for this coming school year. It just will let us gather the data to know which LEAs are not doing it and which ones are. Yes, how I can put that link in. Let me
I'll
pull
do
it
it,
up.
Jared. You can keep going. I'll drop it in.
Awesome. Thanks, Tracy. So complete that. It's fairly quick, but it's going to give us information to be able to get student licenses and figure out, as Sid talked about, as far as costs and all of that information. So if you will just fill that out, that will be helpful. Next slide. So this is a reminder, because I do get a few questions about retaining the paper worksheets that students are completing. And so in the notes for the slides that were sent out there's more detail, but this is essentially the high level. Retaining those paper worksheets for the current school year that you're in, and then those can be destroyed following that year. That just will give you a chance, if needed, to be able to reference a student's work on their worksheet if you need to look something up. Next slide. Oh, let's see if this Cadence Math is optional. Someone above me can respond to TMA and how that evaluation looks.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think looking at teacher merit awards, if that's something that you're utilizing to determine teacher merit, then you would likely want to continue to administer that assessment. If you're utilizing that specific data and not Acadian's reading data, then that would be a discussion with your LEA to determine if you'd like to continue to administer or if you're looking at choosing a different state mandated assessment like Acadience Acadience reading to utilize for the Teacher Merit Awards.
There's another question about if the school ends tomorrow, then we can shut them. Yeah, really the reason to have those documents and those worksheets are to support students as you're going through the year and with instruction, seeing where they're at, and then helping them move forward to the next benchmark. So having them for the next year, we're not seeing as valuable, and so those could be destroyed. So this slide, there's a link there, and maybe someone could put the link for that Google folder in the chat as well. The link in the slides will lead you to a Google folder that are the parent notification letter templates. And these templates, we realize, Dallas and I, that we're at the end of the school year, so it's not as timely as we would have hoped. But we also didn't want to rush them, and we wanted to make sure they were valuable and helpful. So just a couple things to look at when you open up that Google folder. There is a template or a letter for each grade and for each time of year. So beginning, middle, and end of year. The letters are for the K3, the letters are for Acadience reading and math, both information is included there. And then since reading also has grades 4, 5, and 6, there's separate letters for reading, and it specifies that in the title of the letter. There are 3 extra things that we've included. So there are QR codes for different activities that are connected to the different measures that a student took at that particular time of year in that grade level. There are QR codes to videos on what is Acadience math and what is Acadience reading. And then there's also a video on how to read the parent report. The idea is that these letters are stapled, connected somehow to the student report and their supplement. They're not taking the place of. We tried to remove any redundancy from that. And so they are just a support to provide parents and teachers as they look at the student reports, and also a way to explain maybe some activities students might want to work on, or how parents could work with their student to improve certain skills. And then also, what is Acadience reading and math? And so hopefully those are supported or helpful for you. Again, these are templates. You can take them and edit as you need to. There are certain things that need to be included on those letters, but we've tried to make this as a support. So give us feedback. Any questions, let Dallas or myself know. I see a hand raised. I don't know that can she come off mute, Kendra? Oh, yeah.
Whoa, thank you. I was just about to type it in the text box. You guys are so fast. First of all, I want to say really thank you so much. My district has also put together activities digital for families, and I realize what a monumental task that is. So thank you, and thank you for sharing that with us. My question has to do with SB 241. Is there a plan to change these letters to incorporate elements from SB 241 for those individual reading plans?
We can actually address that. We just talked with Teaching and Learning this morning, so that's a great question, Kendra. So we have a couple of changes, like we mentioned, to parent notification letters, but we decided to keep those separate than the letters that would be required from SB 241 around retention and creating the reading plans for students. So teaching and learning, Julie Clark and her team are working on some of those communication pieces that are separate than the specific letters around Acadience results and utilizing those results, but keeping that separate from the plan to uh, have a student with a reading plan, an individualized reading plan that's required with 241.
Okay, thank you, Sid, and thank you, Kendra, for the question. Okay, we can move to the next slide. Okay, and I'll let Dallas take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Jared. So we have an end of year Acadians reading and math data analysis training coming up that will be led by both Jared and myself. So we'll be going over your end of year reading and math data. If you want to join us for that, we would love to have you. This is specifically for school leaders. We're looking more at the school level rather than at the individual classroom level. That will be on June 16th from 9 to noon. So on that slide is the Midas information, so you can sign up within Midas, and then also the Zoom link that we will be meeting in. And on our next slide, please, Emily. There's just some information for the reading administration course for upcoming sessions. If you have anyone who is new to your LEAs, then you are going to want them to take this reading administration course if they have never given the Acadience assessment on ALO before. So those meeting dates are listed there. The Midas course is listed as well. So please forward that on to those of you who have new incoming people for next school year that need to be administered on how to give the reading assessment on ALO. And I am looking at the chat here. It looks like there's a question from Cindy. So Cindy, our testing windows for Acadians are set by board rule. So those windows that we have there are set within board rule. So those windows, unfortunately, we cannot change the dates of them. And then Kendra. So Kendra, yes, with your Acadience assessments, you are supposed to send home the Acadience letters that Jared shared for every administration. So for beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year. So you're supposed to send that home 3 times a year when the students take the benchmark. There is part of board rule that says that parents will be notified after they take that benchmark assessment with their results. So those are the letters that you can use that Jared just shared earlier. And then a separate letter to revolve around some of those new requirements with SB 241 will be coming out from teaching and learning soon. Okay. And I think that that wraps it up for Acadience today. But if you have any Acadience questions, please feel free to reach out to Jared or me. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Dallas. Okay. Dynamic for you with DLM. The state window closes June 6th. However, sounds like some of you are done with school, so your window should have closed a couple weeks ago. You have until June 6th to get any special circumstance codes put in. I have linked here to the 2526 special circumstance code document that lives on the Padlet. And if you are wrapping up school here pretty soon, you probably might want to go pull one of those monitoring test progress reports and find out if you have any students that haven't started yet. With DLM, a student needs to complete one testlet, get that submitted, and they're considered a participant and will produce a score report. So the score report's not going to be valid in that proficiency level, but it will produce a score report to you. So those kiddos are considered a participant, and that is for both our state ESSA accountability and federal accountability. So there's no code that is needed if they complete one testlet. Okay, next slide. Just where we're at as of, I believe, what is today? Thursday. So Tuesday, I pulled these numbers as I was putting slides together. We still had 58 students in Utah without a first contact survey submitted, and that did account for my students that already had special circumstance codes entered. So there's 58 students kind of hanging out in the system that we have no idea what's going on with them. We had 60 students in ELA that were still not on a roster and didn't have a current special circumstance code entered. 58 for math and 56 for science. And then we had, oh, I meant to delete the 42 code. Sorry. We had students not starting testing. 95 of those kiddos, we've got 95 kiddos that haven't started any ELA testing. And that does account for those that have special circumstance codes entered. We have 200 that haven't started any testing for math and 191 for science. So as of Tuesday, we were sitting about 85% of students in DLM have completed testing. Next slide. Score reports. So we are in what DLM calls a batch 3 state because we take the longest and we don't close our window to June 6th. We will not receive official score reports available to you guys until August 3rd. So that first week in August, you as district level folks should be able to log into Educator Portal and be able to pull down those score reports. And again, teachers won't actually be able to do that until we have students re-rostered to them in the fall. So we do ask that you folks in the district come August, figure out how you're going to get those score reports out to teachers and parents. And so then there's a link to that DLM district test coordinator Padlet for you, and then a direct link to how do you access those score reports once they're in come August 3rd. And I believe that is all I have for you for DLM. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.
All right, for RISE, go ahead and go to the next slide. Admittedly, this is not new. We've talked about this a little bit because the end of the year is coming quickly, and for some of you, it's today. But if you are interested in participating in the RISE benchmark for writing, that's still available to you. Go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm begging on behalf of Megan that the next prompt is available for 7th grade informative writing. So if you still have teachers who are looking for something to do with students, that is a great option for them as we move through the last couple of weeks of school. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Admittedly, this is also not new, as I shared it last month, but not everyone was approaching their last week of school back then. And based on the calls and emails I've been receiving since our last meeting, it needs a revisit. All of your cleanup tasks do need to be completed by June 12th. However, your SIS system is most likely going to automatically exit your students on your last day of school. So you'll just want to ensure that that's done before, regardless of the June 12th date. But Maureen did mention that we have worked with CAI to freeze what's there. So hopefully over the next couple of days, if you have students who are exiting, they should still appear in Tide. But you still want to try to get this done, hopefully before your school calendar ends, if that's possible. If you've been following the chat, you may have seen some LEAs are experiencing issues with their discrepancy report. I have just reached out to CAI for more information. So if you fall into that category, stay tuned. We can send out an emergency AD memo if more information needs to follow with that, but we're waiting on that for now. Go ahead and go to the next slide. For reporting, once your school year ends, all of the most recent 2025-2026 reports are going to become archived. So you'll need to start changing your reporting time period results year and the testing date in RISE reporting to continue to access those. For some of you, this happens today. So just know if you are going to go into the RISE reporting system and you were in there today and things look good, and then you check again tomorrow and you're absolutely shocked when everything is missing, it's not actually missing. Your school year has ended, so now Tide has archived your reports. So just kind of be aware of that. Next slide. Once your window closes, we've talked a little bit about this already, you have 3 weeks to distribute ISRs to families. Guidance for generating the RISE writing ISRs begins on page 169 in the reporting guide, and all other subjects begin on page 184 of the RISE reporting guide. You may also want to just do a quick refresher of RISE reporting by reviewing that section of the training that I provided earlier this year. I've linked it here for you and even noted the timestamp where the reporting specific guidance begins. If you have other questions though, just let me know. I'm happy to help you. If nothing appears in the cleanup reports, yes, Jen, you're good. However, if you're not able to generate a discrepancy report, that's going to be problematic because it's not going to show you that there's anything outstanding. Next slide. Looking ahead, Cambium has provided this information regarding the RISE Secure browser. You will also want to note this if you are over high school testing, since Utah Aspire Plus is sunsetting and students enrolled in grades 9 and 10 are going to be moving into the RISE system for their assigned assessments for spring 2027. I anticipate CAI providing more detail in the coming weeks, so please just watch the AD memo very diligently and share it with your technology personnel. I will also include any updates in our June meeting with you all if they are available then. Next slide. Looking even further ahead, the fall RISE training is scheduled for Thursday, August 27th from 9 to 11:30 a.m. As always, it will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel. However, I have not included any registration information as Midas is being sunsetted and replaced. Until we have specific dates and know how to register for courses in that new system, this is more of a save the date than anything else. I will share more information regarding how to register when that becomes available. If you are new to the RISE platform, whether it be due to a new position or work title, or maybe you've even been in assessment for a while, but you're only familiar with Utah Aspire Plus or ACT since you're at a high school, you will want to plan to attend, as this is going to be incredibly comprehensive of the system itself and will work as a great preview for what you will be experiencing in the spring. Next slide. We'll talk a little bit about Utah Aspire Plus. Next slide. Scott touched on this already, but our finalized reports from Pearson are going to be delayed to May 28th for availability in the Atom system rather than the previously mentioned May 22nd date. So if you're planning though to refer families to the Pearson Family Portal, that is still going to go live on June 2nd. But know that everything in the portal is also on the ISR. If you want to review the guidance for the score interpretation guide or this training, I've linked both of those here, again, including the timestamp where you can find some detailed reporting guidance if you need a refresher. I also wanted to reiterate guidance from the vendor documentation as well as the training, because I've received a lot of questions as to why do not report might show on a student detail report in Atom. And this is specifically just due to students not meeting the 85% attemptedness threshold to receive a score. That's provided in the guidance, so don't be afraid to review it. It's good information. This is expected system functionality, though. It's not an error. So don't be alarmed if you come across this messaging in Atom. It just means the student didn't complete enough of the assessment to receive a score. Next slide. When it comes to the Utah Aspire Plus ISR, there is an example in the score interpretation guide that I've taken the screenshot from, but if you're new or haven't looked at one in a while, know that it includes a composite scale score along with a predicted ACT score range. This is also broken down into subject area predicted ranges, as well as the accompanying scale scores, as well as proficiency levels based on our Utah core standards. Next slide. For ACT, next slide, this information was shared in the AD memo last week, but I wanted to touch on it briefly again in case you missed it or weren't sure how to interpret the messaging. But basically, ACT's research team discovered an equating issue specific to state-administered online assessments. So this does not affect any paper administrations. It also does not affect any ACT national administrations where a student would sign up themselves to take the test on Saturday. Those scores were removed from My ACT and ACT Success on May 13th, and the repopulation of the newly reported scores began May 18th. ACT had originally reported to us that all of the reporting updates should be available by June 2nd. However, we were messaged yesterday that scores would be updated by May 22nd. And based on what Scott and I can see in ACT Success, I think fingers are crossed, all of ours appear to be there now. But if they're not, just know it is swiftly coming and they have been guaranteed to be there by tomorrow.
They are there now. I just got an email from ACT stating.
Sure. There we go. Hooray. Perfect. If your understanding of the issue is still a bit murky, Scott had the best high-level analogy for this that actually helped me better understand it. So if you're familiar with golf, basically after they were able to review the data, ACT realized they needed to adjust the handicap, so to speak, when it came to scoring. ACT assures us that any students whose score is adjusted is going to see an increase. And if students are having any issues accessing their reporting after tomorrow, have them reach out to ACT for assistance. I've included that information here. Or if you have any further questions on what has occurred and you would like to have more detail or a more detailed explanation, feel free to reach out to them as well with any of those questions. Next slide. ACT is also gearing up for the next school year and are continuing to provide college and career readiness workshops. There are 2 currently scheduled as in-person events in Utah, one in St. George on September 11th and one in Sandy on October 6th. If either of those work for you, I'd encourage you to register. You can also share this information with school counselors or other administrators who might find these workshops beneficial to their work. Attending these gives you a chance to engage directly with ACT experts, which is kind of nice. Next slide. There are also many webinar options with different topics available, and these are focused sessions on ACT-backed resources that you can use all year. These webinars are typically an hour long. Again, share these with anyone in the field who might find any benefit to them, as these experiences provide a more comprehensive look at how ACT can support your LEA throughout the school year. All of these workshops are free to attend, and the in-person ones are tailored to trends that are specific more to our state and region. With the online workshops, there are also options where you can register, but should you not be able to attend, you will also receive a recording afterward if you register for those. Are you required to or encouraged to hold an ACT event at our school during the summer? Julie, that is a local decision up to you if you choose to. Next slide. I also wanted this little update on your radar. We are anticipating an enhancement to the ACT administration for spring 2027 state administration as ACT is transitioning from their current systems. So think TCM, TAA, ACT Success, all of those things are going to be rolled into Pearson's ADAM system. And if you've been working with Utah Aspire Plus testing the last 3 years, I don't anticipate this change being too difficult for us to navigate. While we don't have access yet to ACT's version of ADAM, we are hopeful that this transition comes with other enhancements, as we are already aware of what ADAM's capabilities and limitations are. But think of it as rostering, reporting, accommodation, all those things all being rolled into one system rather than the multiple systems that ACT has previously have. I don't have any more details to share regarding this change, but I'm just giving you the heads up that, I mean, if you're really sad that Utah Aspire Plus and ADAM are going away, you are going to get a tiny taste still, because ADAM's going to return, just with a different assessment. And my final slide for you today is just a couple of more dates to calendar out for the upcoming school year so that you can hopefully plan to attend or notify the people who should if you are leaving the assessment world or if you do some more delegating of responsibilities in your LEA. The UTIPS training is scheduled to be held on Wednesday, August 12th at 1 p.m. and the STAMP training for our dual language immersion students with our partners with Avant is scheduled for Wednesday, September 16th at 1 p.m. Again, like with the RICE training, I will follow up with registration information when it becomes available with our new system. And with that, I think we're done, friends.
You can sit on mute.
I think oh, there she is. I was like,
I was
she can't
okay.
get
For some
unmuted.
reason, I only had the pin. It was only giving me the pin, not the arrow. So I had to figure out a different way that I could unmute. So sorry, everyone. Thank you so much again for your engagement and your thoughtful questions, and for the USBE team for the preparation and sharing of the information today. I appreciate working with all of you. And if you continue to have any questions, we're happy to hang on for a minute and respond to any questions. Or if you think of other things, please reach out. We're happy to communicate via email or phone call as well. So we'll hang out for another minute or two if there continue to be questions, and otherwise we will see you next month. And enjoy end of school days the next couple of day or weeks for depending on your LEA. Thank you all.